On the morning of Good Friday, April 19, 2019, Kurt Kaser's day commenced as usual. His family had been tending to hectares of land in northeast Nebraska for 3 generations. Savoring a quiet moment with his cigarette, he slipped on his work boots, slid a pocket knife into his pocket, and stepped outdoors. There was no rush. The weariness of years and arduous work had taught him the peril of haste. Losing concentration in such a setting could precipitate a calamity within seconds, particularly in the vicinity of agricultural machinery. Kaser was armed with all he needed for a day in the fields. Awaiting him outside was a truck laden with corn, prepared the previous day by his workforce. It was Kaser's responsibility to transport it to the silo. The day seemed perfect for the task, with the sky clear and the temperature gradually warming. But he knew better than to trust the capricious spring weather of Nebraska. An unforeseen downpour could drench the corn, relegating it to the dump instead of the silo. Arriving at the silo, he found the place deserted. He had given his employees the day off for the holiday. In fact, there was no human presence for kilometers around. He positioned the vehicle adjacent to the corn trailer, equipped with immense augers, shielded by a grate. Kaser maneuvered the machinery, introducing a large pipe to the setup. The rotating augers moved the grains, propelling them up the pipe. From the pipe's opening, the corn surged into the silo. After unlatching the truck's trailer, the corn grains cascaded onto the grate, spilling into the augers of the adjacent trailer. With the machinery activated, the corn began its swift journey towards the silo. As is often the case, after a mere minute or two, something went wrong. As it turned out, the corn was flowing from the truck into the trailer at an alarming rate. The deluge of grains practically clogged the augers, soon spilling over the sides. Kurt scaled the grate, planning to shut the trailer and regulate the grain's influx. However, in his haste, he overlooked a significant hole in the grate, a hole he himself had carved out a few months prior. It wasn't until his foot was ensnared in the swirling corn that he realized he had inadvertently stepped into it. He felt a constriction around his foot. The augers, still spinning, were drawing him into the trailer. Simultaneously, the corn ceased spilling from the truck's trailer. The merciless augers were shredding his flesh, separating it from bone. He wrestled to dislodge his leg from the grip of the machine. To compound the horror, the machine also tugged his pants down, leaving Kurt convulsing as if a colossal hand was flinging him about. The sight of his exposed bones struck him, the way it eerily reflected against the metallic surface of the trailer. Surprisingly, there was minimal blood. That perplexed him. About 20 centimeters of his leg were stripped of flesh. He then watched his severed foot being tossed around by the augers like a discarded rag doll, ultimately ending up in the pipe's opening, disappearing into the silo's depths. He took solace in the fact that his head was spared. But the insatiable machine continued to consume what was left of his leg, tugging with increasing force. The controls to halt the machinery were out of his reach. He let out a scream, but quickly grasped the futility of it. No one was around to come to his rescue. He thought of his mobile phone. A frantic pat-down of his pockets yielded nothing. The device was not there. Then he caught sight of a shimmering object between the augers. His phone was on its way to join the silo's contents. In the throes of desperation, it had slipped out of his pocket and fallen through the grate. Grasping the bare bone of his leg with his hands, he strained against the machine, attempting to wrest his leg from its merciless grip. However, it wouldn't budge even a millimeter, and the force pulling him in was intensifying. The augers were relentlessly drawing him deeper. He knew it was only a matter of time before he would have to yield. The loss of his leg was imminent, and with it, likely his life. He anticipated losing consciousness from the blood loss and envisaged his demise. Resignation was beginning to settle in when a realization struck him. He still had his pocket knife. It was a budget promotional knife, the kind that seed companies hand out to farmers. He retrieved it from his pocket and unfolded it. The blade was barely 10 centimeters long. He glanced from the gleaming steel to his ensnared leg. The hole was large enough to consume a few more centimeters of his limb, leading to the knee. and ultimately the entire leg. That spelled certain death. With his left hand, he yanked down the remnants of his pants, revealing the bone. His right hand held the knife. Without hesitation, he began slicing through muscles, tendons, and tissue, anything within the reach of the blade. His fingers were stained with his blood. Each incision was acutely felt, but he persisted. As blood slicked the knife's handle, it slipped from his grasp, narrowly caught by his left hand. A momentary sigh of relief escaped him. If he had lost the knife, his life would have been next. He wiped the handle on his trousers and resumed the gruesome task of severing his own leg. The pain seemed inconsequential. His mind was consumed by a singular thought: survival at all costs. He was stronger than the stupid machine that sought to claim him. After severing the final muscle and tendon, Kurt freed what remained of his leg. Discarding the knife, he crawled towards the control panel to deactivate the machine. He dragged himself to the cabin of the truck, shutting it down as well. For a fleeting moment, he lamented the waste of fuel, then collapsed onto the ground. His gaze landed on the garage. His phone was there. Salvation? He ground his elbows into the earth, hauling himself in its direction. He had to persevere for approximately 70 more meters. Several times he had to halt for rest, promising himself it was only for a moment. Then, he'd push on. Stopping equated to death. He wrestled with the distance, striving, succumbing. Those 70 meters were the longest journey of his life. Upon reaching the garage, he hoisted himself onto a table to seize the phone, before collapsing onto the floor. Instead of dialing emergency services, he called his son, Adam. Having served extensively in the fire department, would know what to do. Adam was in a store at that moment. As he picked up his father's call, he managed to discern that Kurt had lost his foot and was in dire need of help. The word machine came through distinctly, accompanied by his father's frantic plea for emergency aid. Then, the call disconnected. Within moments, Adam was at the helm of a pickup truck, pressing down on the accelerator with reckless abandon, navigating almost desolate roads. As he raced towards his father, he contacted emergency services. His worst fear was arriving too late and finding his father had bled to death. 5 minutes post-call, Adam arrived at the garage. His eyes took in the scene, the machine, the blood. His father was nowhere in sight. Then he spotted a blood trail leading into the garage. Sprinting inside, he discovered his father on the floor, bleeding heavily, a lit cigarette between his lips. It looked like Kurt was having what he believed to be his last smoke. Adam managed to stammer, "How bad is it?" Kurt cast his gaze downward to the space where his foot had been a mere 20 minutes prior. Between two drags of his cigarette, he managed to quip, "Looks like I made quite a mess." Only then did Adam muster the courage to glance in that direction. The mutilated leg, with bone protruding from severed muscles, was a horrific sight. It was coated in a mix of blood and dust. Adam quickly dialed the chief of his fire department unit. Despite the ambulance being en route, he requested a helicopter. Switching into firefighter mode, he began engaging his father in conversation, hoping to keep him conscious until the medical team arrived. A few minutes later, the emergency medical personnel reached the garage. They gently positioned Kurt onto a stretcher. He lost consciousness during the drive, but revived in the helicopter during the transit to a hospital in Lincoln. 2 surgeries, and 3 weeks later, Kurt Kaser returned home to the farm. His leg was amputated just below the knee, the stump neatly bandaged. Despite being back in his familiar surroundings, he struggled to find inner peace. He navigated his farm on crutches until 4 months later, his prosthetic leg arrived. Finally, he could return to what he did best, working the land. From then on, he approached his work with significantly heightened caution. Thank you so much for watching. We appreciate your time and hope you enjoyed the video. If you liked what you saw, be sure to check out the other great content on our channel. Your support means the world to us, and we can't wait to bring you more. Thank you again, and see you in the next video.